Today we will be looking at the immediate denture workflow for digital dentures. So here in the administration screen, we are going to set this up just like a regular denture. I've chosen to use the individual tooth method, which means I will design the teeth and the base myself. So I have this set up as if I'm milling in the MCX5, but this would also be a great workflow for 3D printing as well too. So feel free to utilize that option as well when it comes to the manufacturing side of things. So I chose to section my anterior teeth and my posterior teeth for the upper jaw, but you do have full control of that in the software. You do have the option to add a try-in should you need, but again, that is optional given the fact that it is a case for an immediate. So once we have these details, you're going to notice that the scan phase is grayed out. That's because that would have been taken care of on the Primescan side of things, as you can tell from these intraoral scans. So you're going to notice on the bottom of the screen that we have upper jaw, lower jaw, and then copy upper and copy lower. The reason that we have copy upper and lower is that it's actually just a duplicate of the upper and lower jaw. The reason we use this is for the set model axis step to be able to line up things like the occlusal plane and the midline based on where the current teeth are, because essentially what we're going to be doing here in the edit model stage is removing these teeth. We're going to be doing a virtual extraction here. So in certain instances, sometimes people will like to utilize something like the cut tool first. This is extremely helpful, especially if there's going to be something like a bone reduction at the time of the extractions with the surgeon or the general practitioner. So using the cut tool just allows you to control and manipulate a little bit more of the bone as well as the teeth. So I'm just chopping the gums a little bit here and the teeth, and then I will use what's called the replace tool to fill in those holes now on the ridge. So one thing with the replace tool, it was designed to fill in holes on scans and models. So because of that, it prefers to have a nice smooth line. So you want to ensure that there's no rough edges to your margin that you're creating here, and to ensure that there's no points or areas that might interfere with the design. So at this point, we're just drawing a margin. So we're using our left cursor. Single clicks with our left will tag down our line and also allow us to curve it at the same time. And then it's a double click to start and to end. So at our starting point, we double click and now it's highlighted in yellow. And when we hit apply, it's going to virtually fill in this area with virtual stone. So we will see now kind of a yellow marking here, obviously, as opposed to the tissue color. So I'm just going to do the same thing on quadrant 3. Fill in any area that needs to be filled in terms of the area where the extractions would take place. Now, in certain instances with the immediate cases, the teeth will be far more spread out in regards to which teeth you're extracting. So you will notice that this is the case for the upper jaw. So you'll see that I do not actually use the cut tool for that. I'll just draw right around the actual margin of the teeth to create my virtual extractions. Now, once you fill in this case here with the virtual stone, I'm going to use my form tool now, and I'm going to just smooth out any areas that might be a little bit lumpy or bumpy or have any little sharp edges towards it. I'm just going to smooth those out to ensure that that's not going to affect my denture base. I'm going to proceed with my upper jaw now. With the upper jaw, you'll notice that, like I was mentioning, there's a lot more kind of spacing and things like that. So I'm just going to go right in with my replace tool and start virtually extracting the teeth. So the nice thing with the replace tool is I can just draw a circle around easily things like the molar in this case, just because it's a sole tooth in that area, without having to necessarily cover the entire quadrant with that virtual extraction tool. I'm going to proceed in the same quadrant with some of the anterior teeth now, just creating that hole. Now, I was mentioning to you, if the area doesn't have a smooth line, you will get that error message. So I just go back in here and I'm just going to fill in, make sure that my line is smooth, doesn't disappear under the tissue at all, just to make sure that it's a sound, smooth surface. going to hit apply again, and this time it'll work and virtually extract that area. So now in the next portion, because there are several teeth in that particular quadrant space, you'll notice that I wrap around a few teeth at a time. If I wanted to go right across to the back molar, I definitely could have, but it is up to you as the operator on what you prefer your ridge to look like based on your virtual extractions. So in this case, I just prefer to do kind of sections at a time. So then I'll take care of the molar and the premolar together at the end. So once I have my virtual extractions taken care of, again, I can use my smooth tool and smooth out anything on the ridge should I need to. So in this case, I'm going to use my smooth tool and just smooth out a little bit in quadrant 1, just to ensure that that's not a sharp or pointed edge for my denture base. So following this step, the manual registration and check occlusion, really not necessary. We would have taken care of those things with our Primescan when we actually took the scans, where the system was able to stitch our copy jaws to our existing jaws, and then of course our buccal bite scan was taken in the Primescan. So we're able to move forward to set model access. So this is where I was mentioning that because we have the copy upper and lower, you're going to see on the left-hand side, we have those teeth now to reference. So even though our arches, our working arches, reflect the virtual extractions, we can actually still see the existing teeth on the upper and lower side of the left-hand side of the screen to be able to identify things like the midline and the occlusal plane. So we can adjust these arches accordingly really easily because of this workflow. So then from here, we're going to be able to draw our denture baseline. So just like drawing any sort of denture baseline, we're able to basically control the borders of our denture so it doesn't change from an immediate workflow versus a analog denture or anything like that. We're basically identifying the borders of where our denture is going to sit. So once you have your upper border defined, I can select my lower jaw now on the bottom of the screen and proceed with the same thing. Create my border for my denture base. Now the software often with models is able to attempt and try to find the denture baseline for you. With immediate cases, especially with an intraoral scan, you will find that the system has a little bit more difficulty finding that border for you, just because of how the finishing of your scan will look, and that will be, just operator to operator, depending on how much, detail you've captured in the vestibule, etc. So you will find that with intraoral scans, like a Primescan, you will have to, more often than not, to find the denture base yourself. But it doesn't take you more than a couple minutes. So the next step is the insertion axis and blockout. So we're trying to minimize undercuts here by controlling the insertion axis path. Now, one thing to note, the system does allow you to block out. You'll see on the upper right hand side, just below on the tools where it says set insertion axis, there's also the option to block out. So should you need to block out, you can. So often I find that denturists or lab technicians or doctors will block out for immediates in an analog setting. So the same can be said here. If you wish to add blockout, you absolutely can. If you choose to just try to minimize the undercuts with the insertion axis path as best as you can too, that's more than acceptable as well. But you do have the option to add the blockout. The software will not automatically block out for you like it will for things like custom trays or splints. This is fully controlled by the operator. Once you have defined that insertion axis, the next step is going to be to identify the model analysis points, which gives some details to the software in regards to landmarks on the ridge itself. So you're able to move those markings according to the placement. Now, if you have the help tool turned on, you're able to actually see kind of the full diagram and description of kind of where it wants you to place those dots. So that's a helpful tip on the right hand side. Now, one thing that you're also able to do, let's say, I'm just going to back up here for one moment. If you do find that you need to open up the bite using the virtual articulator, you're actually able to open up the incisal pin. So in this case, I'm going to open up my bite here 2 millimeters, and I can identify so on that virtual articulator. It's always going to give me the warning of, am I sure that I want to proceed? And in this case, I select yes. When we move forward, the very first step of the design phase is always going to be the parameters. It's important to set parameters based on the manufacturer's recommendations for their materials. So it's always good to reach out to the manufacturer of the materials that you're using for either the teeth or the base to ensure that you know things like, for instance, the tooth insertion depth or the pocket spacer. Pocket spacer would refer to how much bond you're going to use for the teeth. And then minimal thickness, as a very base minimum, how thick is that denture base going to be needed to be? So these are important things to kind of note when you're looking at manufacturer's recommendations based on the materials that you're using. The very next step here is adjust morphology. With the adjust morphology option, you're going to be able to take a look at your teeth. So I'm going to actually place my 2 arches together. So then from here, if there was something that you wanted to change in regards to, let's say, the shape of the anteriors or anything like that, you do have the biogeneric option on the side, so you can scroll through the different library with that arrow where it says biogeneric variation. However, with the anteriors, if you do highlight the 6 of them, you also are able to choose from teeth shapes, so oval, squared, or tapered. So in this case, I'm going to change mine to the oval shape. When I proceed forward to the positioning step, I'm just going to turn off my minimal thickness just for now, just to visually see here. And I like to hit harmonic setting just to group everything together. But for a case like this, I'm going to actually remove my second molars so that I have a little bit more space to work with just the 6 teeth. So once we have remove those teeth, one thing that we are able to do is that we are able to reposition the teeth and shift accordingly. So if we did want to move them forward a little bit, obviously we didn't have a wax rim to reference for things like the facial lip support and things like that. So at this point now we are able to shift the teeth forward, obviously gathering more lip support at that point. We can highlight all of our teeth together. You always want to make sure that you check off linear. Linear will just basically group all those teeth together so that when you move them, they're moving all together at the same time. So it's a little bit more user-friendly at that point and a little bit more accurate in terms of moving and shifting all your teeth in a uniform manner. So if I wanted to tilt my teeth, shift my teeth up or down, anything like that, these are all the movements I can take care of here with the software in the positioning step. I do recommend getting your teeth positioned, all together first in the positioning step. In Edit Element, if you want to twist and turn one specific tooth individually for aesthetic purposes, characterization, kind of in a custom way, I would recommend that in Edit Element, and just do that one tooth kind of at a time. Now I can actually choose to view my arch and jaw open so that I can see kind of how my teeth are lined up on my ridge right now. So you are able to see kind of your full positioning here. Once you move forward to Edit Element is a step where you can make adjustments to the teeth in particular. So you are able to, add characterization to the teeth from an aesthetic perspective, just a custom characterization like I was mentioning, things like twisting the teeth or anything like that. One thing I do like to do, especially if I'm going to be milling or printing my teeth, is I like to try to give them a little bit more depth, a little bit more definition. So there's a really nice tool in Edit Element known as incisal variation. It comes in very handy for any anterior teeth. So I'm going to highlight my upper 6 anterior teeth in just a moment here once I have all my teeth proposed. And I'm going to be able to add kind of that depth and definition using the different variations. Now you will notice the software puts in kind of a root looking structure to the teeth. That's just temporarily right now before it's finalized the actual design. Those will disappear and become a neck of the tooth according to the tooth socket space that you have allotted for this particular case. So with my upper, I'm going to highlight my 6 anterior teeth. Once I do so, I turn on incisal variation, and you'll see variations 1 through 6 all do a different kind of component. Variations 1 through 4 take care of the facial aspect of the tooth. And you'll see as I increase the strength, it gives more depth and definition to the teeth. On the screen, it's always going to look a little bit more dramatic than it is. Obviously, if you're at 100% strength, it is going to be quite defined. However, anywhere from kind of that 20% to 35%, you're going to have some really nice definition that will be able to be, kind of proposed to the tooth so that when you've milled or printed the tooth, it's going to add that extra definition to them to make them look a little bit more natural, which is always key for our patients. Once we're happy with the look of the teeth, we're able to move forward to the editing of the denture base. Exactly as the name would suggest in that stage, we're able to, of course, make any adjustments to the proposed denture base once it comes up. So the software is now going to propose the denture base based on where we've proposed the baseline for it, but as well based on where the teeth are, it's going to now propose things like festoonies and things like that. And then we can, of course, define it further for both the upper and the lower jaw. You will find that with the editing of the denture base, I would say probably 98% of the time, if the software has a hard time generating the base, it's usually to do with minimal thickness. So this is where you might want to either, 1, adjust the parameter that you have currently set for minimal thickness, or 2, you might want to look at potentially opening up the bite if you can a little bit, especially where immediates are concerned, just given the fact that space is often an issue. But as soon as the software is able to propose it, you're able to use things like the form tool, smooth out anything that you might need to on the actual design itself, and customize anything additionally. So if you want to add more festoonies, if you want to add some stippling, if you want to just smooth it or over bulk it because you're going to do all the finishing at the bench, because things like the Dentsply Sirona products, both the Lucitone digital print or the Lucitone 199 disc, they are finished the exact same way that traditional materials are finished. So it will depend on kind of how you are manufacturing these denture bases with what materials. That will best determine what is the best course of action for how you design your denture bases. Once you have the denture base looking how you would like it to, the next step is where it's editing the denture connectors. So the denture connectors being any of the teeth that you currently have sectioned together, kind of like a bridge. It's going to allow you to edit them, make them bigger, smaller, move them should you need to. So you have full control with the edit denture connector stage to proceed with items as such. When you come into the edit denture connector step, often you'll have some warnings that might reflect where a connector is maybe a little bit more shallow and things like that. You have the ability to either go back and edit the denture base to adjust for that, or you can proceed forward. It is up to you based on kind of looking at the detail, in which case, is the connector actually sufficient? Are you happy with where it's placed? If you are still able to move forward. It is just the software's way of giving you a heads up, should it need to. So you can see on the bottom, you're able to choose from any of the connectors there that are noted in between the teeth that you have sectioned. Any teeth that are not sectioned together, you will see that there is a connector missing in between them. So you have full control at that point to, again, go back to administration if you want to connect them, or if you want to move where your connectors are between the teeth, you do have full control at this point to go to administration and repropose those denture connectors. It'll just make you redo the edit denture connector step. Once you have looked at your denture connectors and you're happy with them, you are able to move forward to the finalize step. In the finalize step, what's actually happening is the software is actually generating the neck of your denture teeth and the socket space to equipped for those teeth. So that's kind of what it's taken care of in the finalize stage. Again, if you ever get errors in this stage in regards to the denture base not being able to be fabricated, that will be because of a minimal thickness issue where it doesn't feel that it's able to adequately make a denture base based on your parameters for minimal thickness. So again, it's important to just identify, are you able to open up the bite? Are you able to make the teeth a little bit smaller in the edit element stage? And if so, are you able to go back and proceed with those things? So that's kind of where, digital sometimes is not always the answer. And sometimes you do have to default to an analog method. And that is usually where minimal thickness is a concern. So once it is able to finalize and you proceed forward to the export stage, you're able to see your tooth files as well as your denture bases, where you're able to proceed forward with exporting as STLs, or if you are milling in the inlab MCX5, you can export directly to the inlab CAM software to be able to mill your base and mill your teeth. So when we proceed forward here, we're now going to see our tooth files as well as our denture base files. So you can always see on the tooth files kind of like a faint line. That's kind of where the gum line would be. And then the software has proposed the neck of the tooth for us. And then when we move this forward here, we can also click on our denture base to take a look at our base itself for the upper jaw. So at this point here, you can see on the right-hand side, export to inlab CAM and export to STL as well. So here with the anterior teeth, this gives you a better view of kind of the neck of the tooth I was mentioning. That's what the software proposes in the finalized stage to